talked about revolutionary technology, AI, digital everywhere, and so on. But in all this discussion, are we missing? Uh, are there people being left out? Is there a digital protection gap that we are seeing in the market? To delve deeper, we have the next panel who will be talking about bridging the digital protection gap in a thriving digital economy. Before we start the panel, we will have a short video. The moderator of the next panel, Mr. Milan Naik, President, Asia and Middle East and Global Affinity Lead of BOXX Insurance Incorporated. BOXX is a global insurtech which helps the world's businesses and connected households becoming digitally resilient and has presence across North and South America, Europe, Asia and the Middle East. Along with him, joining in the panel is Mr. Atul Mehta, CDO, International Business in Bajaj General Insurance. A strong advocate of digital-first distribution, Atul has been instrumental in integrating insurance into partner ecosystems, expanding bancassurance and fintech collaborations. Joining us is also Mr. Rajat Sharma, Chief Revenue Officer, InsureMO and EXCO member, India Insurtech Association. Along with him is Mr. Sushant Subhash Kulkarni, Senior Vice President and Head of Banking, Network Alliances, Payments, Infra, Government and Loyalty at Tech in Razorpay. Thank you. Oh, okay. Mr. Sushant will just shortly be joining us. Next we have Mr. Vaishali Tiwari. Vaishali is
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and it's quite sort of heartwarming to see a lot of people on a Friday evening still staying back, and means this topic is of interest and clearly something that resonates with you. So I'm glad that we have a fairly good gathering despite it's a Friday evening. So thanks for being here. We've got a very interesting panel that we put together, and BOXX has been working with IIA for a while, and we see this to be a great platform to talk to the insurance fraternity, and including both on the demand and supply side. And to me, I think this is one of the most progressive and relevant platform for us to have conversations, which to us is core to our business as BOXX Insurance. When you think about cyber, I think today it's a very amorphous subject. Most of us don't know what that really means. In fact, I was just walking in over here and someone over there at the back mentioned that, oh, there's a session on cyber, but cyber hai kya? And that's fair. We understand where that is. And we all know that these are very, very early days in terms of, what is cyber, what's the problem statement, what we're trying to solve for. But the reality is that this is an imperative, and it's something that is cyber protection, insurance is going to be the need of the hour. And I'm going to start with a profound statement and set the context, and then probably have the panel come in to share their respective thoughts around how they see the cyber world and what are they doing as ecosystem players, as well as what are their thoughts in terms of how do you resolve some of those challenges and issues that are there. So if you think about human migration, time immemorial, the largest documented human migration that's ever been mentioned is when the rural China moved to urban China. Documented number is 160 million people was shifted from here to there in close to about 5 decades. And if you kind of just pick that anecdote and then extend it to another world, the transition from the physical world to the digital world today, that transition within a short span of time is translated into 5.6 billion people. The reality is that we are living 2 lives. That's the reality. And when you have a life where we have to now, from a mindset perspective, move from physical assets, physical protection, to coming to something which is digital, I understand that people may not even know what that really means. And most of the people in the sector also themselves don't know, because this is always a catch-up game. But the reality, like I said, is going to be imperative, and it's going to be the need of the hour. Now, when you think about the quantum and how big this problem is, right? So whenever multilateral agencies, governments of the world have tried to say that, how big is this problem? It's interesting that cyber crime and everything to do with cyber impact has always featured in the top 5 risks globally with climate change. So that means the impact is large. And if you aggregate the losses that people have ever sort of, in a way, talked about, communicated, it translates onto close to $10.7 trillion, making the 3rd largest economy of the world. So these numbers, irrespective of how you dice the pie, the reality is staggering. The need of the hour is very much there. And I think there is so much scope for everyone to play their part and participate. I was at GFF just about a few weeks back, and every time I've gone there, you've had the Prime Minister, you have the Finance Minister, everyone talking about, the fintech ecosystem and its impact in India, and the role it's playing. A lot of people over here have contributed to that growth. But every time in that conversation, at least 4 to 5 times they mention the need for cyber resilience and cyber trust. Because the day you lose the trust, and Sushant, we had some conversation, and you will have some things I'm sure you'll have data to talk about. But if you lose that trust, this whole ambition to become the world's largest digital economy, I think is at risk, right? And we are, of course, right now riding that wave. So the India story, 900 million people are in some shape, form connected, smartphone devices, digital payments, et cetera, put it all together. Staggering numbers, 19 billion UPI transactions every month and growing, which is like, wow, like we are living a payments revolution. 50% of the world's real-time payments is happening in India now, of the world's. So we are actually now significantly accelerating and leap forwarding any other economy of the world. So these are very interesting times from that standpoint. I believe that a lot of players, panelists over here, my fellow colleagues, and a lot of you in the panel, in the audience as well, are doing your bit. But doing your bit from a perspective of building digital awareness, getting consumers educated, but there's a lot more to be done to empower individuals and make them a bit more sort of safe and secure as far as they live their digital lives. The governments also did the 1930 helpline. It's interesting, they brought it out and they announced it. Of course, most of the people are not even aware of the fact that there's a national cyber helpline. 1.1 million people called. The aggregated loss reported was $1 billion. And interestingly, some sort of conversation about the fact that only 2% of the people who got impacted called. So this is also not a global problem. It's a real world India problem as well. And to that, with setting that context, let me start now opening the conversation to the panelists and, to get their views and thoughts about, what they think about it. So I think this is a conversation or a question to everybody over here in the panel. As you are thinking about, cyber risk, or most of you all work with telcos, fintechs, banks, enable businesses for them. What do you see is the current state right now when you see from your own respective lens about cyber resilience, protection? Now, of course, from enterprise point of view, you can talk about it, but more so from a consumer or the small business around the corner. What do you think about it? And it would be great to get your thoughts and views on it. So, who do you want to go first? Atul, you want to go first? Sure.
So, Milan, whatever points you touched across, if you really see the bottom line of it, if I talk from an insurance carrier standpoint, insurance is all about trust. And whenever you're transacting, let's say, with an insurance company, as a consumer, you would want that your trust would not be broken. But if you look at the other transactions you get into, there is a reasonable degree of trust you place even into that entity. So if you're transacting a banking transaction, you're swiping your card, you're making an online purchase, everywhere there is an inherent trust that this transaction will be fair or my money will not be lost. And from an insurance company standpoint, when I link both the things, if an insurance company cannot give that trust to a consumer, I think any kind of cover is futile. Cyber is a situation, cyber insurance is a concept which actually is now taking a leap, but it is not really getting through. So increasingly what we see as insurance carriers is that some amount of consumer awareness is there, but in a very, very minuscule or a small scale. What we are seeing is these products are more contextual and embedded in nature at this point in time, though that is the right way to do this also. But the larger awareness is not with the end consumer. It is the entity which is basically trying to push this through. So it could be a banking institution, it could be a payment gateway, it could be an Insurtech platform who basically is propagating the need for cyber because they want the security around the consumer. But the consumer himself is not really getting that awareness through. So I think that's one area which definitely as insurers and even as within the financial space, the partnerships, all of us I think need to look at that consumer and try to give them contextual nudging so that the cyber insurance basically takes off. So that's my view.
Bang on, I think, this is something that we've been witnessing as well, is that, the reality is, insurance India mein bikta hai, koi khareedta nahi hai. And leave aside cyber. It's just such a distant kind of a dream for us. And in that scheme of things, I think, coming to you, Rajat, in terms of this whole embedded, because you guys power up that embedded use case across the globe. How are you seeing and what do you think are the current gaps? And some views on that.
Look, I think the point that Atul made, one, it has to be contextual, embedded, right? Now, specifically cyber as a domain is a very technical domain in itself, right? So here we are not talking about a life insurance or a motor insurance product, right? Here we are talking about technical capabilities, and as you said, right, it's not a physical house, it's an IP address, right, which you're trying to save. The identity is lying behind a digital identity itself. So there comes a lot of need for platforms to be integrated, to the data to be integrated, right? Not just within government enterprises, but within your own enterprises itself, okay? Now, we do all kinds of products. Globally, we do around $26 billion of premium. Even we don't see cyber the way it should have grown in India. It's God is due. Now, the points that you've raised are very valid points, right? 50% of global banking transactions are happening in India. Digital transactions are happening in India. So, if I were to look at a leader, a leader in the market or somebody who can guide the market, it has to be India, right? We are even beyond China. We beat China around 3-4 years back in terms of the transactions that we are doing here. Now, understanding cyber as a subject, understanding digital transactions as a subject, and then looking at which are the segments. So I see enterprises, I see merchants, and I see consumers, right? So there are three aspects to that. Mature markets, US, Europe, Australia, so they are all still focused on enterprises. I don't think so. Consumer side cyber is still prevalent anywhere. So from my perspective, where we see as an enterprise, the opportunity that lies in India is huge, is massive. Because I was telling you, right, so we launched one of the first cyber products in India with credit. Even I was not hopeful of the product. But the way it took off, was amazing. And that gave us confidence that India has a market for everything, and cyber as a market is there. And not just urban, it's happening in tier 2, tier 3 states, right? So I think that's where the opportunity is huge. The only thing is you need to have platforms, infrastructure, solutions like yourself, which can bring everything together and make it contextual, and that too competitive at a cost that people can afford it. I think these are things we'll have to see and see how does this fit into the India market.
Oh, excellent, Rajat. I mean, as you rightly said, I think this whole thing making it super contextual. Even from our BOXX experience perspective, we've been in India for about now close to 3.5, 4 years. And we realized that, you know, I mean, the hypothesis is that no one's waking up in the morning and buying cyber. And now, given the fact that we are so deeply involved in the sector and clearly want to drive impact and empower our consumers at large, I think it's about, you know, working and building storyboards that in a way are super contextual in journeys where they are deeply engaged already. So coming back to some of that, and probably we'll come to into those solutions. But Sushant, you know, as Razorpay, I mean, you're literally sort of paving the waves for the entire digital ecosystem of the country. I mean, you guys are, you know, one of the driving forces in many ways to enable the entire payments infrastructure for the country. You see the consumer side and you see the SME side as well. I think it'd be good to get some sense and your reflection of, as you see digital compromises, digital protection, and cyber protection to enable payments and for it to scale up as well. So I think some thoughts on that would be great.
Sure. I'll just give you some snapshot data, right? India processes about 60 crore UPI transactions daily. That's about 49% of what happens on a global scale. Remove Brazil from it, we would probably be about 80%. The average ATS is about 1,300, and Indians use UPI for practically everything on it. It's a product which is homegrown. None of the insurance models have ever been built on something real-time, which has been built from India. So we've technically solved what the world has never seen at scale. So the horizontal's been done. The verticalization is where we've kind of failed. And when I say that, it means that for a driving license, you still, I mean, when you get a car, you need to have a insurance. They don't test how good you drive. You need to have a driving license, you need to have a car insurance. Unfortunately or fortunately, to accept payments or do business, there's no such license. I mean, a gumasta and all of that can be called it, but there's no justification for you to protect your consumers for any frauds that happen through your platform. And we are trying to still solve the payment leg of it. And by design, hence get embedded for what, like Google says, the next billion users, as thought leaders to ensure that the next billion users derive that same comfort and confidence as they derive from the humble rupee when they give it in person. And that's an area where we've probably been practicing the maximum amount of friction, while we've been trying to solve a lot of it, you know, for the merchants and for consumers. Be it partnering with 130. In fact, we were the first ones to integrate with them online real time, because in frauds or cyber risk, there's a golden hour concept. The average stat from the time it would hit us for about 48 hours, we were the first ones to integrate with that platform so that any call out gets registered at our portal in about real time, and we solve for it within 2 hours. So, and that's key, because money to be held in any bank or any payment method can only be done during that golden period. If you miss it out in terms of me letting it, coming to know 12 months, 12 hours later, 12 days, 12 hours later, it's already gone. So we're not solving for it from an education perspective, but we are trying to solve for it by getting deeper on the payment method, the merchant ecosystem, the MCC categories, the card methods or the UPI methods, or whatever the regulator or, you know, other partners across banks, merchants, SMEs do it. Lots being done, you know, on it, from a payment method for observing, you know, creating our own fraud rules, tracking consumer personas in terms of behaviors that don't come in, you know, MCC and network traits which do not exhibit behaviors. But it's all, you know, derived as a factor of continuous learning over 10 years and 5 million merchants, and roughly doing 200, 300 million transactions on a monthly basis. But if you look at it, is there an insurance product that comes and covers us itself? I think my CISO would probably, be circumspect that even when we float something like a cyber insurance, we don't get too many players participating to even cover something like a 20, something like a risk cover that we bring to the table. So, to your point, right, at an enterprise scale itself, forget what we are trying to solve for an SME. Even for players of our heft, muscle, size and scale, we don't see enough insurance players willing to kind of take that bait or have that risk algorithm which could cover us what we are trying to do. So, that's just giving you the resilience part of it in terms of the need of the hour. Massive. The 300 odd million e-com customers can easily be about 900 million. Today, that first UPI transaction failing being as high as it is what is holding us back in terms of increasing that volume at least 3x. And I'm only talking India.
No, I think, the India opportunity is immense. And I think, Rajat, to your point, as we see the globe as well, the consumer cyber protection play is relatively new globally. So it's not an India thing itself. But if you think in terms of where does the real opportunity lie? And what are the ingredients for building a promising cyber protection and resilience business? What are the key ingredients to that? Massive population. India scores high on that. Thriving digital economy, I think it scores high on that. The clear impetus from the government to build the entire digital highway, whether it's payments or whatever be the case, I think it scores high. So irrespective of which way you look at it, to me the way we see it is the fact that, and we're speaking to some of the global reinsurers, that where do you see the cyber business, consumer cyber business, say in 3 to 5 years down the line? And maybe this is a bit of a blue sky thinking. They're saying it's going to be as large as health insurance. So as much as your physical health will be protected or need to be protected, your digital health will need that element of protection. Now, whether the customer buys it or it comes form of your credit cards with cyber resilience, or it comes what you do as power it up, or say, for example, a Razorpay says that, hey, every merchant on my platform is taken care of in some shape and form, not fully, but if you want more of it, please go ahead and do it. So what it gets me to the point is that clearly India is on this cusp of really taking off because it has everything element required for us to build a thriving and a big, massive digital business or cyber protection business. So Atul, as an insurer, this is more forward-looking. One of the things we see is capacity, prioritizing, because I know you have so many more things happening. The motor business growing, health business growing. Organically itself, companies like yourselves are growing at 10, 20% annually. How do you see, or what innovation or smartness, say for example, insurers can do to in a way really capitalize on this business? And I think there's an early mover advantage. So how do you see this in terms of cyber business?
So see, let's say a company like ours, which basically has a distinction of being first in the market ever since the privatization happened, one of the early players, a player of mass scale, and an insurer which is present across all spectrum. When you look at the business today, most of the general insurance business in the Indian context is not really following a risk-based pricing method. A lot of it is sentiment-driven, a lot of it is pure play competition, a lot of it is high distributor margin, some of it also is developmental-driven like government schemes and all. So in that entire ecosystem, there is enough and more to do using tech and some innovation on the product side. Now cyber is a direct result of that. So if you look at a company like ours, how we look at a product line like this is on embedded side, more like contextual selling, pushing this to institutions rather than going to consumers directly, or using a mass stream, let's say an agency or a broking channel. So what we look at is, largely e-com companies or distributors who are in the digital space, or institutions which are lenders like banks or NBFCs. Now when there is a product, you need to also find a distributor to sell it. Now in the whole scheme of things, the financial distribution ecosystem is more equipped to bring such a product to consumers in a more efficient cost manner. So the cost will be good, the distributed margin obviously are there and will continue to there, because you cannot really sell a financial services product like insurance without a distribution margin. So all these things are taken care of using tech and the right distributor platform. And cyber is one such line, I would say, which is picking pace. And we personally feel, as a large insurer of scale, where we are present in almost all spheres of distribution, we see very obvious interest of distributors also. And wherever we are selling, we are seeing claims. So one important element of a product also is that it should see claims. If you don't pay claims, the product is actually no good. So it will die its natural death. So what I feel is that starting from the consumer point, cyber will actually now move towards enterprise also. And that is a much larger play, I would say. And we were just discussing offline before this, I know that there are shopkeepers who are not insured for their entire payment system. You can give them a cyber today for a limited time. There are SMEs who actually run a lot of cyber risks and they are not insured at all. So all that piece will also come in. Capacities will have to be brought in. Insurers have to have serious underwriting interest on this. So we are committed to do that. So we already engage with a lot of reinsurers, players like you as well. All this is, I would say, work in progress. But consumer line is something which is has started. The enterprise line is something which is, I think, will take some time, but will come through.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things you talked about is the efficiency of distribution in a market which is young. Maybe at some point in time, customers will make those informed choices. And that's where, I think platforms like InsureMO. So from a product innovation perspective or something which is relatively new, how are you seeing this category as InsureMO in India, of course, but globally as well? What's the big thought process around it?
So, one thing we did, Milan, was we started looking at insurance products as not as products, but as ecosystems, okay? This was 10 years back when we started creating a microservices-based architecture, right? Everything for us is a SKU. Insurance product for us is an SKU, okay? Now, beyond that SKU, what we did was we created ecosystems. So cyber, I believe, has to go through an ecosystem play. We should not look at cyber as a cyber product. You should have to look at travel as an ecosystem and fit cyber in there. You have to look at cards as an ecosystem and fit cyber as there, right? You'll have to look at telco as an ecosystem and fit cyber in there. And that's where, one, the embedded play comes into picture, okay? Which means you will not have to go and start selling it. This has to be embedded. People have to bake in these kind of, as riders, as individual products, as packaged products. One, that will improve that. Second, you'll need a lot of data points for cyber products, specifically from a claim standpoint, to make these cyber insurance products packaged and driven by ecosystem. Because a cyber product that you will sell for a travel will be a very different cyber product than you'll sell for a telco. Likewise, it could be for health, it could be for payments, likewise it could be for UPI. I mean, it's a different game altogether, right? We think of payments as payments, but UPI itself is a domain in itself today. That's nowhere in the world. From India standpoint, we'll have to think of, how do we look at a cyber product from a UPI standpoint itself, and we'll have to work with the governments and see, how do we guys create a product around that? And I think that's the play. That will bring adoption and also maturity into the product. And then once we start looking at ecosystems, then, people like Sushant, he can give us more ideas. For example, the golden hour concept that we have. We cannot imagine that as insurance or Insurtech. That domain knowledge comes from these ecosystems, and that's how we tailor out the product to fit into that. We've seen that happening with every other, we have 9 ecosystems today. Cyber does not fit into any of that. And since we're discussing with players like yourself, right, we now understand that can we bring in something like a BOXX into our own propositions so that get baked in as a packaged product.
Sean, I mean, again, coming back to the Razorpay ecosystem and all of that, I think keeping the whole merchant ecosystem side in mind. I mean, 60 million merchants today, most of the people are connected, in some shape and form, they have digital products that they consume, either through banking or whatever it is. What do you think, assuming you were being given a free charter and you had a wish list, because you genuinely can drive impact at that ecosystem level, right? What would you think would be your, top 3 priorities? And that if I were to get these 3 enablers, what do you think would be your ask? I mean, out of players like over here, I mean, maybe it's BOXX, maybe it's probably the insurers, Bajaj Allianz from a capacity perspective.
I think, thanks for putting me on a spot, but I think three big ways in which this can be scaled is, and we're already doing it, by the way. DOT recently launched, in their own way to protect phishing. They've now scored each phone number. You may not know it, but they've kind of created a fraud risk, high risk score for every mobile number. And there are players who are in the P2P space who kind of look and scan at that number to say, okay, and it pops up saying, look, if this number you're sending has been tagged before for being a high risk number, the sender kind of can hold or at least have that moment. Likewise, when I said India was the first to kind of teach people how to scan and pay a QR, they just forgot about the refund link. And that's where probably the fraudsters are able to kind of get in. If you want to look at it, what you said in terms of embedded, because really even I was telling you earlier, the Indian rupee itself requires to say the value of 10 rupee in 15 languages on a note after almost 100 years. That's the complexity of India, which no other country has. The same value to be spoken to each Indian requires even today's note. Even the e-rupee has 15 languages. So when you want to communicate value to a person, you really need to do it in their own language, and I'm not even counting the dialects. When you want to do that at scale in India, you really need to embed it from the down up for each customers, for tier 3, tier 4, which is where probably frauds have moved on to. They are no longer attacking the top 1%, there's actually going down to the 100 and 500 rupee transactions, because every merchant or every lower tech service provider you are able to integrate, you get access to the banking ecosystem and the larger ecosystem as well. So the fraudsters have actually kind of moved forward. So one is obviously embedded at scale. Players like cloud, because 99% of them kind of on board on cloud. If that itself allows, just like you buy a car and you have to take an insurance before you are able to drive your car, irrespective of your driving license, you should have a cyber insurance kind of embedded in it. And it's of course some of it which government will need to kind of force things down. It should see a lot of awareness come forth at a consumer merchant level, where they at least start asking, saying, besides your shopkeeper's license, do you have a cyber risk cover insurance in some form and manner which protects me? The second probably would be in your own merchant ecosystem, embedded solutions. We do a lot of gig stuff, Instagram cake sellers, offline, online, tier 3, tier 4. The learning curve in the same MCC goes drastically from 1 to 100. Give them a customized embedded solution that they can buy. Today, if I can take a 50 rupee insurance to go to insure my ride on the way to the airport on my favorite ride-hailing app, I think a 3 rupee, 5 rupee, 6 rupee, 10 rupee cyber insurance for a day, when you have a large sale of that particular store, should at least go about protecting the biggies. But we'll really have to, again, innovate at scale for India, and at a grassroots level where the knowledge is very, very disparate. And third is, of course, at an enterprise level, if we could co-create or build these products, at payments. Today, when an IRDA asks for any new payment method for insurance, we were the ones who are kind of working for it. So while we may be under the aegis of the regulator called RBI, we actually work for quasi-regulators as well. Because somewhere, wherever the money movement happens as a payment aggregator, we are the ones holding the fort to innovate, build, and like you rightly pointed out, we know the genesis, we know the history, we know the merchant, we know the category, we know the payment method, we know the consumer behavior, we know the transaction size, and far, far more by pin code, by nuance, by online, by offline. Can somebody use all of this to kind of co-create and make the world a better place, starting India first? The answer is a definite yes. Is somebody working on it? The answer is a big no.
No, I guess, Sushant, early days in many ways, but it clearly shows the fact that, India has everything that's required to build a very thriving, interesting business over here. And it's gonna sort of hinge on a couple of things, right? One is technology. The other, number two, is this whole thing about, contextual, smart consumer stories. Like, how do you ride off conversations which are more consumption-led? All of us are excited about travel. We are traveling literally left, right, and center. Every flight we take, the flights are full and so on and so forth. So why call cyber? Why don't we call it safe travels? Why, when you do e-commerce and we'll sell cyber in e-commerce? It doesn't make sense to a consumer, but safer commerce. When you're doing payments on UPI, safer payments. So I think some of these smart, embedded micro solutions, and some of these things we're already doing with as BOXX with a couple of partners like Make My Trip. We've got Safer Homes with Housing.com. So it's just stories that kind of feed into the core value proposition or the core product that the customer is engaged in, rather than creating a separate story saying, "Humse cyber khareed lo." That's not going to happen. So I think building one is embedded, contextual, but smart consumer stories. Make them micro, get them initiated into the process, and then, I'm sure the upsell will follow too. And as you rightly said, this problem today is inclusive. So when we did the heat maps on 1930 and people who have called in, like I said, 1.1 million people called. And when you see the spread, geo spread of it, today from the northern tip to the southern tip to northeast to the west tip, everywhere people are calling in and they're sort of, in some shape and form, they're getting compromised. So to your point, Sushant, is the fact that this problem is inclusive. We just have to find ways and means to get to the consumer, get a proposition which is, skinny enough to get the conversation started, and kind of build from there. So I think that's largely the sum and substance. We've got about another 5 minutes. If there are any questions from the audience, we are happy to take that, and then we can conclude. Yeah. Sure. Can someone help with mic? Is someone here? Huh?
Thank you. I was quite happy to learn that there is embedded insurance in almost every segment now in the digital economy. But then the cryptocurrency is something that is caught up. People buy bitcoins. So is there any embedded insurance even in that? That's something I would like to know. Because there are a lot of cyber attacks on cryptocurrencies. And people lose value on bitcoins and due to cyber attacks.
Yeah. So we know who has exposure to crypto over here. I don't know if any thoughts.
Go for it. He's the best person. He's dealing with payments day in, day out.
Saying that puts me in trouble, but yeah. But on a serious note, I think from an India ecosystem, that doesn't really warrant, right? It's something that we don't support, and we'll go with whatever is policy and regulatorily allowed. We will not talk on speculation and something that kind of people do of their own volition. The risk is embedded in it. Otherwise the government and the regulator, who's probably one of the most forward-looking ones, right? We've been hailed time and again globally, so we should take heart from that, and not be naysayers so much, and really take heart from that fact that our regulator is probably one of the most forward-looking, and they, like I said, India is so disparate that it's not us that they need to protect. It's actually the most uneducated, unaware, person for whom the regulator needs to bat for, and that is our lowest common denominator, for lack of a better word. That's where we should play in. From a global perspective, of course, if we support in those markets where we are present in, we obviously follow, all of those rules. But for the payment method that you are mentioning and speaking, we don't have a regulatory go by to work with it in any form and manner. So we'll probably kind of stick with that.
One space which is emerging that we are seeing right now. So look, again, crypto is a very vast domain, right? But within crypto, now the solutions which are getting baked, for example, asset-backed tokenizations, ABTs. Now, because of ABTs, what is happening is, you buy a house, you buy a land, right? Everything is asset. A token is created for every asset that you have, right? And that's where there are some insurance use cases. Again, we have seen smaller countries who are trying to experiment that. We've seen some use cases in China where they've tried to do ABTs as well. Again, regulatory aspects are there. But insurance did come up as one of the topic, specifically on asset-backed tokenization as a concept. Crypto, from a payment standpoint, even we haven't seen it because we've been talking to various regulators all across the globe. Whether that's US, whether that's Europe, Singapore, obviously we are based in Singapore, so we end up discussing this a lot. But I think a real use case, a first step, would always be linked somewhere to an asset, right? Now, at least in China or some of the other markets where they're opening it up, we'll probably have to learn a lot, and then we'll have to figure out what it means for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's so much more to be done at the grassroots level itself today, right? I mean, today I think the bigger pain is, for example, if any of us also on UPI loses 2,000 rupees or on a credit card gets swiped for 5,000 rupees, irrespective of how affluent you are, it pains. So I think let's solve for that to get started with, right? I mean, and to me the opportunity is unlimited. Just if you focus on the common man problems and how do you sort of innovate, just put your arms around. In India, they understand the value of money. And if you lose money, it pains. So focus on digital theft of funds. That's a great way to get started. And I'm sure the Indian market will mature to things like even identity theft. I mean, all of us get, Amazon parcels into our house every day. And those cartons just go out the way it is. And they have all the PI information that anyone wants. And by the way, all the fraudsters are already aggregating that information. And the OTP frauds and all of that emerges from all that data we ourselves are giving out. So at some point in time, there will be some, recognition and the realization, the fact that your digital identity is equally important and you've got to protect that. So like, for example, in some of the markets, we are working with your platforms which focus on influencers. And for them, their digital identity is all they have. I mean, that's what they're recognized for. The other market where, we're doing some great work in India, but for example, we work with the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And they wanted to build a smart economy riding off SME growth. So how do you get SMEs to be digitally resilient? So we create a risk assessment framework. SMEs of Singapore did that assessment themselves. It throws a fantastic report, good, bad, what you should do, etc. But throws a score. And the score, if it's beyond a certain threshold, gives them a seal of confidence from mass, saying you are digitally resilient and hence globally competitive. Now, you can gamify these experiences to get consumers engaged. Because if you get something back in return, that's a great start. Insurance, etc. can follow. So I think some of this element about how do you build smarter solutions to get consumer engaged and interested, and then build from there. I think as we all agree over here that India has everything that's required to build a fantastic business. And I think in the interest of time, we'll probably close the panel with that. Yeah? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for your time and comments. Thank you.